Something has shifted in the way men see women, and it's not subtle anymore. You can feel it in the silence between texts, in the distance growing inside relationships, in how quickly men now walk away from situations they used to tolerate. The truth is simple but uncomfortable. Men are done playing nice with women. For years they tried to be the steady ones, the patient ones, the men who listened, adapted, compromised, and apologized even when they weren't wrong. They did what society told them would make relationships last. But the result was the same every time. They lost respect, attraction, and eventually themselves. Men are waking up to the reality that being the nice guy has stopped earning appreciation. It now earns suspicion, boredom, or manipulation. Women say they want kind, emotionally available partners, but when those men show up, they're treated like placeholders until someone more exciting appears. The modern man has realized that niceness, when not matched with respect, becomes servitude. He's tired of proving his value to women who treat consistency like weakness and indifference like confidence. For decades, men were told that empathy and emotional support would build stronger relationships. But what most found instead was that empathy became a one-way street. They carried their partner's stress, mood swings, and insecurities, while their own struggles were minimized or dismissed. A woman's bad day was a crisis. A man's bad month was him not being in touch with his feelings. That imbalance slowly kills something inside a man. He stops opening up, not because he lacks emotion, but because every honest word ends up weaponized later. The pattern repeats in countless ways. Men try to communicate calmly and are accused of being cold. They raise concerns and are told they're controlling. They express frustration and are labeled toxic. At every turn, the message is the same. Her emotions are valid. His logic is oppressive. Men have realized there's no winning that game. If they fight back, they're villains. If they stay quiet, they're weak. So they're choosing the third option, disengagement. They're walking away before the argument even starts, not out of spite, but out of exhaustion. Women call this emotional unavailability. It's not. It's self-protection. Men have learned that constant sensitivity to a partner's moods doesn't create connection, it creates power imbalance. The more they accommodate, the less they're respected. The more they explain, the less they're heard. Somewhere along the line, women started confusing emotional support with emotional obedience, and men are realizing they're not obligated to participate in that anymore. Men aren't rejecting love. They're rejecting manipulation disguised as love. They're rejecting relationships where they have to keep proving they're good men while their efforts are taken for granted. They're rejecting the idea that they must always be understanding, forgiving, and endlessly patient while every mistake they make is treated as proof of character flaws. They've seen how that script ends, with resentment, guilt, and a man questioning why he gave so much to someone who only noticed what he didn't do. The cultural narrative told men to just communicate more, be vulnerable, show your feelings. But no one warned them what happens when those feelings aren't flattering to hear. Men who spoke honestly about feeling used or unappreciated were told they were bitter or fragile. They learned that vulnerability was only welcome when it made the woman look nurturing. The rest was labeled negativity, so they stopped talking. Not because they shut down emotionally, but because they learned that silence hurts less than being mocked for the truth. That's where the shift begins. When men realize that being endlessly nice isn't moral, it's masochistic, it's performing emotional labor that's never reciprocated, it's giving empathy to people who treat it as currency to spend. Men have learned the hard way that respect isn't earned by how much you give, but by how much you refuse to tolerate. Men are realizing that their good intentions have been turned into liabilities. The more they tried to make women happy,
the more they were blamed when happiness didn't arrive. Every effort became expectation. Every sacrifice became standard. The man who stayed loyal, worked hard, communicated and supported was told he wasn't doing enough. Meanwhile, the man who ignored her or set hard boundaries suddenly became desirable. It took years for men to understand that the modern dating culture doesn't reward good behavior, it rewards emotional leverage, and the person willing to care less usually holds the power. You see it everywhere. Men who once rearranged their schedules to be available now take hours or days to reply. Men who once cancelled plans to please their partners now keep their commitments without guilt. They've stopped apologizing for wanting time alone, for setting standards, for expecting respect. The biggest misconception women have today is that these men are bitter. They're not. They're simply finished being naive. They've seen what happens when you keep giving to someone who sees your giving as proof of weakness. Relationships used to be built on shared duty, now they're built on endless tests. Women don't communicate directly anymore. They measure how long it takes you to notice a change in tone, how fast you'll chase after an argument, how much of your pride you'll sacrifice just to keep the peace. The game isn't about love, it's about control. Men are waking up to that manipulation, and the ones who stop playing are being called emotionally unavailable. But they're not unavailable. They're uninterested in being emotionally extorted. The truth is that men have been emotionally blackmailed for decades. If you really loved me, you'd understand. If you cared, you'd change. If you were a real man, you'd fight for me. These lines aren't expressions of love, they're contracts for obedience. They turn affection into negotiation. They force men to prove their worth through submission. And after enough cycles of this, even the most patient man learns that walking away costs less than constantly defending himself. There's a deep fatigue that men carry now, the fatigue of always being the steady one, the one expected to stay calm during her outburst, rational during her confusion, forgiving after her disrespect. They've been told that being emotionally grounded makes them safe, but safe men are rarely desired. Safe becomes predictable, predictable becomes boring, and boredom becomes justification for betrayal. Men are starting to ask the question they were never supposed to: why keep giving what no one values? They're done over-explaining, done proving, done negotiating for basic respect. Nice used to mean patient and decent. Now it means expendable. Men aren't angry about it. They're just finished pretending not to notice. They see how the same women who preach independence expect men to pay for everything, how the same women who claim to want honesty punish men for telling the truth, how the same women who call for equality still expect men to take all the risks and responsibility when things fall apart. The contradiction has become too obvious to ignore. Men are no longer shamed by the labels used to control them. Toxic, cold, misogynistic. These words have lost their sting because men see them for what they are, attempts to guilt them back into compliance. The same society that tells men to be kind also celebrates women who exploit that kindness. The same culture that says real men protect women refuses to protect men from emotional or legal destruction. And finally, men are saying no, not loudly, not violently, quietly, with conviction. Because when you strip away the games and guilt, what's left is simple. Men want peace, respect, loyalty, and reciprocity. They're not asking for perfection, just fairness. But the more they ask, the more they're mocked. And that's why they've stopped asking altogether. They've learned that peace doesn't come from changing women. It comes from changing how much of themselves they give away. Men are waking up to the bigger picture, that the imbalance isn't just emotional, it's cultural.
Society itself has trained women to believe they can take endlessly and never be questioned for it. From movies to media, the narrative is the same. The woman is always right, and the man must prove his worth through constant correction and sacrifice. Every failed relationship is his fault because he didn't understand her needs. Every argument he wins is a moral loss because he's too logical. The modern world has turned emotional responsibility into a one-way street where men are always expected to carry the blame. The institutions that once upheld balance have become part of the problem. In courtrooms, workplaces, and even therapy sessions, men have learned that the benefit of the doubt rarely applies to them. A man raising concerns in a marriage is controlling. A woman doing the same is standing up for herself. A man asking for shared responsibility is insecure. A woman demanding it is empowered. These double standards are so normalized that even men began believing they were supposed to suffer quietly to prove their love. But not anymore. You can see it everywhere. Men stepping back from marriage, relationships, and even dating altogether. Not because they hate women, but because they've realized the risk isn't worth the reward. They've seen good men lose half their income, their homes, and access to their children in systems that treat them like disposable providers. They've seen their friends destroyed by false accusations that needed no proof to ruin reputations. They've watched as women openly mock men's pain online and society laughs along. That collective silence taught them the truth. No one is coming to save the man who gives everything. This isn't bitterness, it's clarity. Men have stopped believing in a social contract that no longer exists. The idea that if you're decent, loyal, and hard-working, you'll be loved and respected has collapsed. The reward for goodness has become exploitation. The reward for consistency has become entitlement. Women today are not taught to value good men, they're taught to expect them, and anything short of perfection is labeled disappointment. The man who tries too hard becomes clingy. The one who stops trying becomes cold. The man who provides stability is boring. The one who challenges her is toxic. Men are tired of being graded on a curve they never agreed to. They've also noticed something else. Women who demand equality rarely want it when it comes to accountability. Equality when it's convenient, but protection when it's not. Independence when things are good, but support when they're hard. Men have been told for decades to evolve, to open up, to be better partners. Yet few women have been asked to look in the mirror and do the same. Men are realizing that progress without accountability isn't progress, it's privilege. The truth is, the modern woman has been rewarded for emotional immaturity. Social media celebrates victimhood, drama goes viral, the loudest complaints get sympathy, not correction. Men are seeing that for what it is, attention disguised as empowerment, and they're done feeding it. They're done validating every outburst, apologizing for every misinterpretation, and walking on eggshells around women who confuse boundaries with oppression. This awakening isn't fueled by hate, it's fueled by exhaustion. Men have simply reached the limit of pretending that double standards are fair or that love means constant endurance. They're not choosing loneliness, they're choosing peace. And when men start valuing peace over approval, everything changes. The power dynamic collapses because the control was never physical, it was emotional. Once a man stops needing validation, manipulation loses its grip. That's what's happening right now. The quiet revolution. Men are no longer trying to change women, they're changing themselves. They're redefining what it means to be strong, not by how much they can tolerate, but by how easily they can walk away. And the more they walk, the louder the system panics. because it knows once a man finds peace without a woman, the world can no longer guilt him into chasing what doesn't serve him. Men have reached a turning point. They've stopped waiting for society to understand their perspective, and they're no longer trying to prove their intentions. They've realized that being a good man, in the modern sense, just means being endlessly available, emotionally, financially, and mentally, with little to no recognition in return. So they're changing the rules. They're building new standards for themselves, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. You can see it in the choices they make now. Men are spending more time improving themselves, less time chasing validation. They're working out, reading, learning, and building businesses instead of chasing approval from women who see relationships as competitions rather than partnerships. They're investing in their peace, not their performance, because they've learned that no matter how well you play the role of the perfect man, you can't please someone who profits from never being satisfied. Nice men used to think that being accommodating would make them loved. What they've learned is that it only makes them used. The woman who values power over partnership doesn't want peace, she wants control. The moment you stop feeding that control, she calls you cold. But men are no longer apologizing for protecting their energy. They've discovered that you don't owe anyone access to your time, attention, or emotions just because you care. Care is not a contract. What women call detachment, men now call balance. They've learned that pulling back isn't cruelty, it's clarity. It's understanding that not every argument deserves a response. Not every demand deserves compliance. Not every emotional storm deserves shelter. For too long, men have been told that patience is strength. But patience with disrespect isn't strength, it's submission. Respect begins where tolerance ends, and the men of this generation are ending it. They've also stopped mistaking conflict avoidance for harmony. Too many men thought peace meant keeping quiet, but silence under disrespect isn't peace, it's suffocation. Real peace is built on mutual respect, not male restraint. So men are speaking up now. Not to argue, but to set boundaries. They're no longer apologizing for saying, "That doesn't work for me." They're no longer afraid of being alone, because they've realized that solitude with self-respect feels better than company built on compromise. And that's what scares people most. A man who's not afraid to walk away can't be controlled. He can love deeply and still say no. He can care and still enforce limits. The system that thrived on his compliance starts to crumble the moment he chooses himself. When men stop chasing approval, the power shifts. When they stop over-explaining, manipulation loses leverage. When they stop apologizing for their boundaries, respect becomes the only language left. The modern man is redefining masculinity on his own terms. He's not anti-woman, he's pro-dignity. He's not avoiding emotion, he's managing it. He's not shutting down, he's filtering access. For years, men were told that emotional maturity meant absorbing whatever was thrown at them without reacting. But emotional maturity is knowing when to walk away from what drains you. It's realizing that being a protector doesn't mean protecting people from the consequences of their own behavior. That's the new standard. Relationships built on respect, not guilt. Communication rooted in honesty, not manipulation. Love that's mutual, not transactional. And for the first time in a long time, men are not begging for that balance. They're enforcing it. If a woman can't bring peace, they'd rather bring it to themselves. This isn't bitterness, it's evolution. Men have learned that you don't need to be loved by everyone. You just need to stop betraying yourself for anyone. And once a man lives by that rule, everything around him changes. The tone of his voice, the way he carries himself, the type of women he attracts. Because when a man respects himself, he stops entertaining anything that doesn't. This new mindset among men isn't about revenge, it's about balance. For too long, men thought that being the better person meant accepting double standards in silence. They thought emotional intelligence meant tolerating disrespect. They thought loyalty meant staying where they weren't valued. But that version of manhood was built to keep them docile, and men are finally walking away from it. The future belongs to men who've learned to value their energy, who understand that love without reciprocity is exploitation, who know that respect isn't earned through compliance but through boundaries. These men aren't cruel, they're calm. They don't yell, they don't beg, they don't try to convince anyone of their worth. They've realized that people who truly see your value never make you explain it. When a man stops playing nice, he doesn't become heartless, he becomes honest. He sees relationships for what they are, not what they're advertised to be. He no longer mistakes emotional chaos for passion or validation for intimacy. He no longer interprets a woman's approval as proof of his masculinity, because real manhood doesn't need permission to exist. It doesn't require constant validation or endless justification. It stands firm, quiet, steady, and self-assured. And that shift is already changing everything. You can see it in how men are no longer apologizing for wanting peace. They're no longer chasing people who treat them as backup plans. They're no longer rescuing women from problems they created. They've learned that walking away isn't weakness, it's strength. It's the moment a man stops fighting battles that were never his responsibility. The truth is, many women built their identities around the idea that men would always be available, always willing to listen, to provide, to protect, to fix. But that era is ending. Men are withdrawing their energy from situations that don't value it. They're choosing purpose over approval, clarity over comfort, freedom over fear. And that independence terrifies a culture that has relied on men's self-sacrifice to survive. This isn't about men giving up on women. It's about men giving up on one-sided relationships. It's about finally realizing that love without mutual respect is just dependency. That giving endlessly doesn't make you virtuous. It makes you vulnerable to being drained. Men are choosing better, not by changing women, but by changing themselves. They're building a life that doesn't need validation to feel complete. And that's the real revolution. Men who are peaceful, grounded, selective, and self-aware. The men who no longer tolerate manipulation, who don't chase after approval, who don't apologize for their standards. They know what they bring, and they refuse to beg anyone to recognize it. The world calls them detached, cold, or intimidating. But what they really are is free. So if you're a man listening to this, understand this truth. Being nice isn't the problem. Being naive is. Your kindness should be earned, not expected. Your loyalty should be mutual, not exploited. You don't owe anyone endless understanding at the cost of your self-respect. You owe yourself peace. You owe yourself purpose. You owe yourself a life that feels like freedom. The men who are done playing nice aren't angry, they're awake. They've realized that the only approval they ever needed was their own. That's the new beginning, one built on self-respect, emotional control, and quiet strength. And for the first time in a long time, men are finally walking their own path, calm, confident, and completely unapologetic about it. If this message speaks to you, share it. Because every man who hears it and understands that his value doesn't depend on being endlessly available becomes part of this awakening. Like this video, share it with your brothers and subscribe for more conversations that remind men that peace, purpose, and respect are worth more than approval.